Hi, welcome back to Adobe Illustrator CC 2021, Classroom Notebook Chapter 5. This is part 2 of transforming artwork. When we left off, we had just barely finished arranging our artboards and adding some guides. So now we're actually going to start with transforming some of the content. So we're going to work some bounding boxes first. So you can transform content using those bounding boxes, but you can also make it so you can turn those off. So let's go ahead and zoom in till we can see kind of the buildings. So Control minus. We've got these buildings here. Let's go ahead and do a selection tool to select those buildings. And now let's go ahead and view hide bounding box. So view hide bounding box is about halfway down. So now we can actually do things individually. So now we can't resize the group by dragging it. Let's go ahead and take it and move it down to that first guide we created right above the flowers. Go ahead and bring it in there. And we can zoom in closer. Make sure you get it totally where you want it. The space bar and hand. I'll kind of use my arrows, bring it over just a little tiny bit. Make sure exactly I'm on my line where I want it to be. All right, I'm happy with that where it is. So let's go ahead and Control S to save. Let's go ahead and do a view, show bounding box again. So now we actually could transform all of them at once. All right, we don't want to do that. Let's go ahead and click out on the board. So next thing we're going to do is position some artwork on the properties panel. So we can easily, let's do a view, fit all in window. So we actually want to see everything. And we're going to move this section up to this artboard, but we're going to make it a little bit easier. So we're going to select on the group of artwork called commute, which is this one. And now we're going to go ahead to our transform section of the properties panel. So up on the right hand side, we're going to choose the upper left as our reference point. Now we're going to go ahead and change the X value to 0. So we want it to be up in the corner. And we're going to change that Y value to 0. And hit enter. And we didn't tell it where we wanted to go. So I need to do that again. Let's go ahead and click on that blank one first. Now let's choose that one. Now let's choose this and make our X 0. And our Y 0. And enter. So it's going to go ahead and pop that back right exactly where it needed to be. And I am back where I've got everything back at 0, 0. So we're totally exactly where we're supposed to be. All right. And let's go ahead and do a deselect and Control S and save. So we're going to go ahead and scale some objects next. So far we scaled by just adjusting bounding boxes. Now we're going to try a few different things. So we want to go ahead and zoom in on our friend down here at the bottom. So let's grab our selection tool, hit our bicycle, and do a couple control pluses so we can see them better. Now in the properties panel, let's click that center reference point. So we're going to do it from the middle out. And we want to make sure our maintain is set. So we'll make sure that it looks like an actual chain. And we want to, in our width, say we want to make this 200%. And before you do this, go to your more options and undo the scale, corners and effects. And I don't want 200 inches. I want to do 200%. Let's do undo. All right, so I'm back here. My scale is turned off. I'm doing this on purpose because I want you to see something. So I'm going to do 200%. I'm going to go ahead and push enter. And when I push enter, we're going to go ahead and see what happens. So notice what happens to her arms and her legs. They look really weird. And that's because her arms and legs are created as strokes, not as actual items. So they're not where we want them to be. Let's go ahead and undo that one. And let's go ahead and fix it. So we go back into our more options and turn that scale, strokes, and effects back on. So let's go ahead now and do our where are we at? All right, so we did that one. So now let's go ahead and do we undid it. Let's go ahead and fix it. So let's go into our more options. We've got our scale effects back on. In the width right now, let's go ahead and say 225%. And it's going to turn out much bigger. So we can see it has worked out much better where we want it to be. Scales and her arms and her legs don't look totally weird. So let's go ahead and press the space bar and grab our hand and come down to this flower. So now we're going to go ahead and select the flower and play with that. So we're going to go ahead and go to the rotate tool, which is hiding because I've used it for something else. All right, here we go. Rotate is under text. So go ahead and grab your rotate tool. And under rotate, we're going to go ahead and choose the scale tool. So we actually want scale. So it looks like one piece of paper getting bigger into another piece of paper. So now we're going to double click that scale tool. And we want to have it be uniform. And we want it to do 50%. And we do want it to scale the strokes. Oh, that's non-uniform. Sorry. Uniform 50%. And let's go ahead and if you do preview, you can kind of see how it's making it bigger or smaller. Let's go ahead and say OK. So it's going to go ahead and make that smaller for us. So it works really well when you're doing things like trying to scale overlapping artwork, when you've got to have it be really precise. That's when you want to go ahead and not do it by stretching it otherwise. So let's go ahead and say OK and close that up. All right, now let's grab our selection tool and drag that flower. Let's do a control minus and zoom out a couple times so you can see where we're going. All right, we're actually going to take our selection tool, move this flower up over here into the kind of the flower patch. And you can always adjust it with your arrows till you get it where you want it. Maybe I'll move mine over just a little bit. All right, I'm going to do a control S to save. So the next thing we're going to go ahead and do is play with how to reflect some objects. So let's go ahead and do our view fit all in artboard. And we're going to go ahead and we want to grab our bike stats. So let's go ahead a couple artboards over. So I've got this artboard instead. Now with our selection tool, we're going to go ahead and grab this green triangle. And we're actually going to make it an orange triangle upside down right here. So let's do an edit copy. And then we want to do edit paste in front. So it's going to make a second one. Now we're going to go ahead and change that fill color. So let's go to our fill on our right hand side and come down to about the 4th row and choose kind of a funky orange color. So I'm going to choose that orange. So now it's covering up our green. That's okay. So we want to go ahead and grab our reflect tool, which is under the scale tool. So under text, let's go ahead and grab our reflect. And that's going to allow us to change. So I'm going to zoom out just a little bit so you can see. And now as we drag, we're going to press the shift key and rotate. And see how it moves it over just almost automatically for us. So that makes it very nice. And everything's lined up exactly where we want it to be. So let's go ahead now, grab our selection tool and hit our shift and grab that. Make sure we've got, so let's shift the orange, shift grab the back, and let's go ahead and group those. So you can see we've got our two triangles grouped together as a background. All right, I'm going to do a control S and save those. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is rotate some objects. There's a lot of different ways to rotate. So let's go ahead to our next artboard over. So I'm going to use this one. Come on over. Oh, too far. There we go. We want the one that says commute. And let's go ahead now and let's take our selection tool as double click on her helmet. And it's going to go ahead and take us into the isolation mode. Everything's kind of grayed out. Let's do a control pluses and a hand and move it down. And let's grab that helmet again. And all I have to do is use this arrow to rotate, and we can kind of tip it so we can make sure she can actually see. And I'm going to use my arrow keys to kind of move it back on our head a little bit because it seems like it's kind of in a weird spot. So I'm going to tip it back till I've got it kind of where I want it to be. And when it's perfect, let's go ahead and put exit to exit that isolation mode and a Control S to save. So let's go ahead and change to our 3 bikes stats from the artboard navigation. So let's go down to here and grab our 3 bikes. And we're going to go ahead and add some more spokes to our wheel here. So let's go ahead and select with our selection tool this main line that's in the middle of the spoke. Make sure you select in the middle of the spoke, not the outside or here, because you'll get the wrong thing. And let's go ahead and we're going to rotate and reflect a few things. So let's select the rotate tool. It's underneath the reflect. Okay, now it's going to say, what do you want to do? We want to go ahead and rotate from the center. So let's go ahead and click the center of the circle and click there. So now we've got our reference point from where we're going to rotate from. So now we're going to take that pointer. We're going to hit either Option Shift on a Mac or Alt Shift, and we want to copy it and rotate. So I'm going to do my Alt Shift. I'm going to rotate to about -90. I'm going to let go of my mouse. I'm going to let go of my keys. So now we're adding the spokes. So rather than having to do that by hand again, we can have the software do it for us. Do Object and Transform, and then Transform again. It's going to add one more, and go ahead and add one more after that. So Object, Transform, Transform again. So don't unclick your selection, leave it there. We're going to go ahead and Shift click and grab the other spokes as well. So I'm going to hit Shift. I'm going to grab those other spokes. And we're going to go ahead and do, I don't feel like it did anything. Oh, it's because it rotated. Let's go ahead back to selection. There we go. Now we're grabbing the strokes. Undo that one. Oh, redo. All right, so I want to go Shift and get rid of this one. All right, so I've got that one selected. I want Shift, click in the middle of just the paths. There you go. Otherwise, you'll grab the wrong thing. And we want to go ahead and group those because we're actually going to rotate all of them at once. So let's go ahead now. And we've grouped them. Let's double click the rotate tool. It's going to say, where do you want to do it? Let's go ahead and change that angle to about 50 degrees and say OK. And it's going to go ahead and shift all of those at once for us. Let's go ahead and deselect, do a Control S, and let's make sure that we are picking up the next part in the next video. We'll see you then.